My name is Arthur Pennington, and for most of my adult life I was a park ranger assigned to a stretch of land most maps didn't bother to name. I'm not telling you this because I want forgiveness. I'm telling you because the ridge is still there, and because winter keeps returning the same way it did in 1975, cold enough to split stone, cold enough to take a man who hesitates. I didn't hesitate back then. That's what's haunted me. By the winter of '75, I had nearly 12 years in uniform. I knew the sound trees make when they freeze from the inside out. I knew how snow shifts before a whiteout swallows the trail. I knew when the woods were quiet because nothing was wrong, and when they were quiet because something was paying attention. That January, the cold arrived early and never let go. Temperatures stayed below 10 degrees for weeks. Radios crackled constantly because batteries died fast in that kind of cold. Engines fought you before turning over. Everything alive slowed down, everything except the ridge. It didn't have an official name. On our paper maps, it was nothing more than a thin rise marked by tight contour lines running east to west like a wound that never healed. Among the Rangers, we called it Sector Black, not because it was classified, at least not on paper, but because no one lingered there. No trails crossed it. No campsites touched it. No reason anyone could explain why it always seemed less frozen than the land around it. I noticed it during what should have been a forgettable patrol. I was driving an old service truck, heater barely breathing warm air, windshield fogging faster than I could clear it. Snow lay deep and untouched on either side of the road. Then I saw it ahead of me, a dark line cutting through the forest. Not white, not frozen, earth-colored. Wet. I told myself it was shadow or sunlight bending wrong across ice. That lie lasted until I saw steam, thin threads of it rising from the ground like something exhaling. I stopped the truck and stepped out. My boots crunched loudly on snow until they didn't. The closer I got, the thinner the snow became until it vanished altogether. The ground at the base of the ridge was bare soil, dark and exposed in the dead of winter. I knelt and held my gloved hand above it. Heat rolled up in slow waves, not fire, not burn. Just warmth, steady and unnatural, like the hood of a truck that's been running too long. I laughed once quietly because my mind needed something ordinary to cling to. I told myself it was geothermal runoff, some minor anomaly no one bothered to document. That explanation died the moment I pressed my palm flat against the earth. The warmth wasn't even. It pulsed. I pulled my hand back fast and stood there listening to my breathing. The forest around me felt wrong. No wind moved through the trees. No birds called, even the familiar winter creaks were gone. It felt like sound itself was being swallowed, like the ridge didn't want witnesses. I called it in on the radio. "Dispatch, this is Pennington. I'm at the western edge of Sector Black. I'm observing irregular ground conditions." Static answered first, then a click. Then the dispatcher's voice stretched thin by distance and interference. "Copy that, Art. Irregular how?" I looked up at the ridge. Snowless, steaming, waiting. "Heat," I said. Ground's warm, snow's melting. There was a pause long enough for me to tap the radio and wonder if the cold had finally killed it. "That's not possible," the dispatcher said. I agreed with him. I truly did. But my boots were sinking into thawed earth while the rest of the world stayed frozen solid. I should have marked it and left. That was procedure. Observe. Record. Withdraw. Instead, I started walking uphill. Every step felt like crossing a line I couldn't see but somehow understood. The higher I went, the warmer it became. Not enough to sweat, but enough that my bones noticed. Enough that time itself began to stretch, moments thickening in ways I couldn't measure. Halfway up, my radio crackled without me touching it. "Arthur," a voice said. It wasn't the dispatcher. It wasn't anyone I recognized, and it didn't come through the channel it should have. That was when I understood this patrol was never going to end the way it was supposed to. When the radio said my name, I froze. Not from fear, not yet, but because every instinct I'd earned told me sudden movement was a mistake. Predators respond to motion. So do things that aren't supposed to exist. I lifted the handset slowly. "This is Ranger Pennington. Identify yourself." Static poured through, thicker than normal, almost rhythmic. Beneath it was a sound like pressure, like two surfaces grinding together somewhere deep underground. Then the voice returned. "You're standing where the snow doesn't remember how to stay." The words were calm, observational. My mouth went dry. "Who is this?" A pause followed. "Keep moving," it said. "You're not far enough yet." I shut the radio off. That wasn't panic, that was training. You cut off bad information before it settles in your head and starts rearranging things. I told myself it was interference, crossed signals, a prank if I was being generous. But as I kept climbing, my legs felt heavier, like the ridge itself was deciding where I belonged. The terrain grew stranger the higher I went. Mud clung to my boots in January like it was spring. Rocks that should have been rimed with ice were dry and warm beneath my fingers. There was a smell in the air, metallic and damp, like wet leaves remembered out of season. Breathing it in made my sinuses ache. I forced myself to take notes. Weatherproof logbook, Pencil stub tied with twine, hands shaking, warm ground, steam present, no wildlife observed. I avoided emotional language because words make the impossible manageable. Near the top, the ridge flattened into a narrow shelf. Snow covered everything except that strip of land which looked maintained, not groomed, just kept clear by repetition. That's when I saw the footprints. They weren't human, too long, too narrow, too evenly spaced. I followed them for a few steps before realizing something worse. They overlapped my own, not from ahead, from behind. I turned slowly. Nothing moved, no shapes, no shadows, but the prints showed something had walked with me, matching my pace perfectly. Then the silence broke, not with sound, but with pressure. The air grew heavy. My ears rang. The radio turned itself back on. "You write things down," the voice said. "That's why they let you come back." I didn't answer. Others came. They listened better. They stayed where I asked. The answer came from the ground, the air, the warmth beneath my boots. Inside the heat. The ridge changed then. The warmth intensified slowly, deliberately. Steam thickened until the world blurred. The shelf beneath me vibrated faintly, not enough to knock me down, but enough to tell me it was hollow or connected to something hollow. I called dispatch again. The transmission cut, not into static. Into silence, no hiss, no carrier wave, just absence. Behind me, the footprint stopped, overlapping mine, and led downward into a thicker bank of steam where the ridge dipped and vanished. Something was waiting to see if I would follow. I didn't. That choice is the only reason I'm alive. As I backed away, the warmth receded, not gone, just disappointed. The steam thinned. The vibration faded until it could be doubted. I walked downhill without turning my back, every step deliberate. The farther I went, the colder it became, until winter returned the way it was supposed to. Only then did I realize how badly I was shaking. The radio never came back on. I wrote everything down that night. Longhand, page after page. The next morning, 2 men were waiting outside the ranger office. No patches, no insignia. They had my logbook. "The original, we're taking this," one said. I told them they didn't have clearance. He smiled. "Neither does that ridge." They stayed 3 days. Sector Black was closed for weather instability. My radio was replaced. My reports were returned rewritten. Geothermal anomaly. No further action required. When I argued, they told me some terrain was safer left unremarked upon. Before they left, one of them said something I've never forgot. "It's not hostile. It's just not empty." In the years that followed, people went missing, quietly. A ranger transferred early. A seasonal worker never came back. A hiker's tracks ended too cleanly near an unnamed area. Every report was neat. Every winter covered the ridge again. I avoided it after that, not officially, personally. I could feel it when I was close, a low, patient warmth beneath the cold waiting. I retired in '92, told myself knowing didn't matter, but now I'm old. Winters feel longer. And sometimes, when the temperature drops suddenly, I feel pressure behind my thoughts, like something testing the cold to see if it still holds. I'm telling you this because the ridge still emits heat, because maps still lie, because there are places we don't study not because they're dangerous, but because they're inhabited, and because one day someone younger than I was in 1975 will step out of a truck, see steam rising from frozen ground, and think they've found an explanation. They won't have. They'll just be close enough to be noticed. If you want next, I can *** tighten this for a 30-35-minute voiceover ***. Add subtle audio cue notes ***, or optimize it for YouTube retention pacing ***.